people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Another look at the upcoming Sherika Johnson versus Nina Hughes rematch set to go down next weekend on the undercard of George Kambosos' Matchroom debut. All three of these fighters are affiliated with Lou Dembella.
Lou Dembella, who was taking shots at Eddie Hearn, taking shots at the DAZN platform. How ironic that the only way for him to keep his fighters busy is to get them on that platform.
I remember last year he had an idea for an 8-woman tournament, which really wasn't a bad idea, but immaterial without the money, immaterial without the resources to do it, which Lou Dembella didn't have.
Being honest, he didn't have the resources to keep either of these two fighters busy after their initial meeting.
Nina Hughes left Matchroom for Lou Dembella Entertainment over a year ago, and I said it then. That's not a step up.
42 years old now, she leaves Matchroom for Dembella, ends up traveling to Australia in defense of her title, subsequently loses it to Sherika, and here we are.
Now, Nina is the challenger, and Sherika is the champion, sporting a professional record of 16 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 6 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 18 professional bouts. She's world-traveled, she's experienced, she's been a champion at 2 weights.
These ain't soccer moms that she's been fighting over the years. She's won some fights, she's lost some fights, all of which makes her a more experienced fighter than Nina Hughes in the paid ranks, in spite of Nina being over 10 years older than Sherika.
Nina Hughes sports a professional record of 6 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 7 professional bouts, still coming off her lone defeat
To Sherika.
and that was in May of last year. In that way, it hasn't been a full 12 months since either of these fighters saw action, but it's close enough at 10.
10 months out from their initial meeting.
Nina Hughes is not a bad fighter, and even though she only has 7 professional bouts, she doesn't have a bad resume. It's actually pretty good. Quality over quantity kind of deal, to where she beat unbeaten Tszyu Gallagher, unbeaten Jamie Mitchell, unbeaten Katie Healy.
Not bad.
Just not better than Sherika's resume, lest we forget, Sherika beat Nina.
Which really rounds things out.
I don't expect the second fight to go any different than the first one did, even though 10 months have passed. I don't expect Nina to show up a completely different fighter. I think she's going to show up trying to do what she tried to do before, and that's crowd Sherika Johnson mid-range to inside, ultimately getting outworked, overpowered by the bigger, younger fighter. After 10 months at 42 years old, I think that amount of time,
That layoff affects Nina, I think, more than it affects Sherika, who's a fresh and fly 30 years old. Many good years left.
compared to Nina, who is 42, what Nina's been doing has worked so far with other fighters. Just not Sherika, who's bigger, younger, and can handle herself mid-range to inside, which happens to be Nina's sweet spot, but Sherika showed she can work there too. She can move and punch, she can box, and when she wants to, she can bang and brawl.
She's versatile. I think she's going to keep the WBA title. And afterwards,
You know, she's affiliated with Lou Dembella, but by all accounts, this is a Matchroom show being bankrolled by Matchroom. So maybe Matchroom make an investment in Sherika Johnson. Maybe they pick her up like they picked up Ebony Bridges a couple of years ago. Maybe they get Sherika a unification match with this division's IBF champion, Sherita Metcalf, who to my knowledge isn't otherwise preoccupied with anything.
think of this upcoming weekend's fight as an audition for Sherika.
An audition for a role as one of Matchroom's Valkyries. Matchroom already tried to promote Nina Hughes, but I'm sorry to say, there's only so much you can do for a 42-year-old female fighter, whereas Sherika does have many good years left.
You don't think that's kind of cold?
I do, but I wouldn't be of much use to anyone if I refrained from telling the truth because it might hurt somebody's feelings.
It's reality.
I don't say it to be cold or cruel or anything like that, but They did try to promote Nina, didn't they? And it didn't go anywhere. Maybe they'll have more luck with a younger fighter in Sherika Johnson. And all she's got to do is repeat what she did 10 months ago. She's got to beat Nina, keep the belt, then onward and upward. I think she's going to. I think Sherika wins a points decision.
I like Sherika on points this upcoming Saturday in Australia.
Just in keeping with the theme of all things Straya, a look at the upcoming Tszyu versus Joey Spencer fight. Joey Spencer, a guy who you used to see boxing on the undercards of a lot of PBC shows back when Showtime was still in the sport of boxing alongside the PBC. His last fight, however, was not on a PBC show, it was on a Dmitry Salita promotion. Dmitry Salita, who just so happens to have a minor broadcast deal with DAZN. Now, he's going to be traveling to the Southern Hemisphere. Joey Spencer, who's currently on a 3-fight winning streak after having been stopped by Jesus Ramos back in March of 2023. He rebounded off the loss later that year and racked up 2 victories last year over what are pedestrian-level opponents, but still, credit to him for keeping busy and keeping active. I mean, that's a lot more active than your average PBC fighter.
Now he's fighting Timmy.
And what is the rehabilitation effort to get Tszyu back to his winning ways, sporting a professional record of 24 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 17 knockouts, having been knocked out at least once in 26 professional bouts, and that was in his last fight, that crushing defeat to Bakram Murtazaliev.
The intrigue.
Has young Timmy fallen so far from grace that he is no longer the budding young fighter that he once was, that now he is little more than cannon fodder for a Joey Spencer. Joey Spencer, who sports a professional record of 19 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 11 knockouts, having been knocked out once in 20 professional bouts.
I seen Joey Spencer here and there. I gotta be honest with you. Nothing stands out about this kid. He really ain't that good.
The intrigue in association with this fight is whether or not Tszyu is damaged goods, because if he is, then Joey might beat him. But if he isn't, if there is still some remnant of the fighter that he was,
then he should make it past Joey Spencer.
This really is a make-or-break fight for Tszyu and all of his world-level, world title aspirations. If you can't beat a Joey Spencer, I'm sorry, my friend, but it may be time to hang him up.
Yikes.
Seen Joey, he's got the whole Mark Wahlberg, 4 Brothers Detroit thing going on. You remember Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch that used to rap?
What?
Yeah, no, 4 Brothers with Marky Mark, Tyrese Gibson, Andre 3000.
Who's the 4th brother?
The guy who played Achilles' cousin in Troy. I forget the guy's name, but it was that guy.
What?
That's him. That's who Joey Spencer reminds me of. He reminds me of Marky Mark in that movie.
You don't think you're being a little bit rude?
Listen, I'm not trying to be, but like I said in my previous segment, I wouldn't be of much use to anyone if I refrained from telling the truth for fear of hurting someone's feelings or ruffling some feathers. I've seen Joey. Joey's not that good, and it seems to me that the whole appeal of this guy is the Marky Mark thing.
It's just a good reference.
Tszyu already has a better resume than Joey Spencer. In many ways, he's already a more experienced fighter than Joey Spencer, having faced a U.S. Olympian in Terrell Gausha, a former champion in Tony Harrison.
Beat Brian Mendoza, who beat Sebastian Fundora, fought Sebastian Fundora, who beat him.
To fight these guys that can't sell out a high school auditorium. The initial plan was Keith Thurman, who nobody was checking for. They swap him out at the last minute for Sebastian Fundora.
An even lesser known guy, coming off a knockout loss.
You looked around during that fight, and there wasn't even a lot of people there for that fight. I mean, it was a needless loss that didn't have to happen. And the only reason it did is because Tim's got all these big dreams of making it in America. I'm sorry, buddy, but this is not your father's era of boxing. And coming out here was your undoing.
Goddamn wasted time. I happen to think those are 2 losses that didn't have to happen, but agreeing to come to America for a quasi-retired fighter in Keith Thurman, agreeing to that when Keith should have been the one coming to you.
That's what put him on this path. That's what got the ball rolling for all of this to happen. Now, he's on the comeback trail. They're trying to rehabilitate him. They didn't land on Joey Spencer by accident.
No, they didn't. They probably saw what Jesus Ramos did to him.
Now we've got to see what Tszyu can do to him. What does Tszyu still have left after that demoralizing beating to Bakram Murtazaliev. The loss to Sebastian Fundora, I don't think that bothered him, because that was a spirited loss, that was a competitive loss, only made possible due to a freak accident. An elbow to his forehead.
Blood everywhere. It was like a slasher flick. The kid couldn't see.
But I don't really think that's what damaged him. I think the loss to Bakram Murtazaliev hurt his psyche, hurt his ego, a lot more than losing a competitive decision to Sebastian. So now we have to see if he can gather himself and come back from that. Joey Spencer is the ideal opponent for this situation.
It's just a good vibration.
Yo, it's about that time to bring forth the rhythm and the rhyme.
All right.
So when a puncher like a Tszyu gets knocked out, it affects their psyche in such a way that they don't throw with the same confidence and conviction that they used to. They don't commit to their power shots the same way that they used to for fear of what is going to come back at them.
So they don't land with the same authority. As a result, Anthony Joshua suffered from this for at least 1 or 2 years after his knockout loss to Andy Ruiz. Even though he won the rematch,
he didn't win it with gazelle punches. He didn't win it with bolo punches by going for the gusto and going for the knockout. He won the rematch by boxing. And you could sort of see after that he wasn't throwing the hooks or throwing the right hand. The same conviction that he used to, that it took a while for him to go in and go for the kill like he did at the start of his pro boxing career. Is that what we're gonna see from Timmy?
Is he gonna be cautious? Is he gonna be gun shy, hesitant, and as a result, can he not go back to being who he was before his last 2 fights?
This is gonna take time. You don't just beat Joey Spencer, even if you do beat Joey Spencer, and all of a sudden you're back to who you were. This is gonna take time to rehabilitate this guy, rebuild him, build him back up, build his confidence.
The wins over Takeshi Inoue, Brian Mendoza, Terrell Gausha, Tony Harrison, a former champion in Tony Harrison. It was all looking good.
I think that depending on how good he looks or how good he doesn't look, that will determine whether or not the Keith Thurman fight happens. That if he goes in there and he goes back to looking like a wrecking machine, Keith may not want any parts of him. Fighting Brock Jarvis is one thing, but fighting a spirited Tszyu is quite another.
It's not some little guy who moved up in weight. Tim is a bona fide junior middle.
We gotta see what happens, but it's all very intriguing. We then come to former IBF champion Caleb Plant's post-fight reaction to Edgar Berlanga versus that Ortiz guy yesterday. Caleb said then he had the nerve to hold that NABO belt after the fight, even though he can't have it because he missed the weight. Which is true, Edgar missed it by an ounce or a pound, I forget what it was. Caleb finished off by saying, disgrace. Shaking my head.
So now both boys are back in the winner's bracket. They've had their rebound fights. Caleb Plant rebounded off the loss to David Benavidez with Trevor McCumbee. Edgar Berlanga rebounded off the loss to Canelo yesterday with the Ortiz guy. How soon can we expect to see these two guys fight?
I really don't know, because I heard a rumor last week that Caleb Plant actually has a fight coming up sometime in May, just around there. I don't know who against.
I can only imagine it's another stay busy fight, another tune-up kind of fight, because Jaime Munguia is spoken for. Edgar Berlanga just fought.
What about Jermall Charlo?
Well, that would definitely be a stay busy fight if you're fighting that guy. I mean, is he even a boxer anymore?
We know that Caleb Plant has expressed some interest on more than one occasion to share the ring with today's Jermall Charlo after their little melee, their little fiasco, well over a year ago. Over a year later, I don't see the point. Charlo is barely a boxer, barely active.
I don't see the point, but I did hear a rumor last week that he's supposed to be fighting in May. If he is, I don't know who it's going to be against.
Plant versus Berlanga.
What seems like a natural fight to make for the American boxing scene that the American boxing fans would be interested in, but not so interested that you should bill it as a pay-per-view. And I think therein lies a dilemma. Therein lies a problem. Both Caleb and Edgar made a boatload of cash fighting Canelo, and they're going to want to keep getting paid like that. The problem is, neither of yous is Canelo.
They're going to want a lot of money. enough that the event coordinators, whoever they are, wherever they are, they may entertain the idea of billing this as a pay-per-view, and I don't think it's pay-per-view worthy. I don't think they should. But between Caleb's demands and Edgar's demands,
Sure.
there's been a lot of talk about Edgar Berlanga leaving Matchroom. There seems to be a rumor out there that he's leaving Matchroom to go to MVP. MVP, who's doing a lot of business with Netflix. Now on Netflix, I could see this fight happening.
Yeah, if Netflix pays for it.
Netflix seems to have some interest in broadcasting live events, live sports. And live sport is ideal when it's accessible to everybody. Tuck-in fights behind a paywall has only led to the decline of boxing in the American boxing scene. So ideally, they would do a fight between Edgar and Caleb the same way they did Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Make it available to all of your subscribers. All 200 plus of them around the world. That way, you get as many eyes on this thing as possible.
Need I remind you? That's just a postulation. That is just me bouncing ideas around. Assuming Edgar goes to MVP. And assuming Netflix wants to do this fight. This is all on assumptions.
As far as the fight itself, it's tough to call because on paper, you'd say Caleb Plant has a better resume than Edgar. You might even argue that he's a better boxer than Edgar, though perhaps not a physical specimen. They both share a common opponent in Canelo Alvarez, and being honest with you, they both fought Canelo the same way, circling away to take the sting off his punches and buy themselves some time, some room, some real estate, by not engaging. They both did that. Caleb did it, and Edgar.
But Caleb got knocked out, and Edgar didn't.
So how can you say that Caleb is a better boxer than Edgar when they both applied the same strategy, but only one of them finished the Canelo fight on their feet?
Only one of them got knocked out.
Is Caleb a better boxer than Edgar Berlanga? I want to say that I like Caleb more as a person, on a more interpersonal level. He's a easier fighter to like, easier to root for.
But you don't edge fights based on who you'd buy a beer.
It's hard to say that Caleb is actually a better boxer than Edgar when you both applied the same strategy, but Edgar seemingly had more success with it for all of his limitations. So maybe the only way to reconcile this is that while Caleb might be a slightly better boxer than Edgar, he's just not as good a physical specimen. He's not as durable. Caleb Plant has always had a gas tank issue. After 6 or 7 rounds, the guy starts slowing down, starts getting hit like clockwork.
He was outboxing David Benavidez in the first half of their fight, but in the second half...
So it happened. The punches are getting in, landing more cleanly, and Caleb is a bit more stationary. It's harder to move around.
So what happened?
So if that happens in an Edgar Berlanga fight, does Edgar pack a big enough punch that he can knock Caleb out? I dare say, yeah. I think he punches hard enough to hurt Caleb and stop him if Caleb gasses out.
The opposing argument is that if somehow Caleb can finish Edgar before the half,
he doesn't gas out. He doesn't get tired. If he can finish Edgar within the first 6, because as the fight progresses, he's gonna get tired.
If history is any indicator of things to come, he's gonna gas out.
So then the question is, do you think Caleb can do that? Do you think he can stop Edgar Berlanga within the first 6 rounds where Canelo couldn't?